So we about to get into that chapter, that guy. His stories always be interesting. He be finding some amazing, crazy stuff. So far we heard about this guy getting out the Navy. I'm gonna shut up. We gonna watch this video.
Another skeleton was found in the Belanglo forest. She'd been stabbed to death, her spine severed. In late 1989, a man traveled to Australia. He was very, very excited to visit. He'd always wanted to go, and he was planning on backpacking his way across that great big country. His name was Paul Onions, and he was from Birmingham, England. He was just out of the Royal Navy and was looking for a fresh start. So he popped into a little shop, was going to get a cold drink, and then he was just like randomly approached by this lad who came up and asked him if he needed a lift, asking where he was going. South. Same direction. And so they set off. This guy said his name was Bill. Big Bill. And he was full of questions for young Paul. They were yapping away, and Bill said he was from a Croatian immigrant family, divorced and from the local area. They eventually pulled over on the side of the highway. Bill said he needed something from the trunk. He did not want to be there with this Bill. He also got out, at which point Bill told him to get the f back in the car. He just somehow got out of the car and started racing through traffic on the highway, swerving and dodging cars.
Yo, so you trying to have a new fresh start, and you meet this big bad motherfucker, I guess, named Bill, Big Bill, whatever his name is, but he chasing you, bro, after you get out the car, like, man, fuck what he on. And then Big Bill get out the car, try to hunt you down.
When he crossed the road, he turned and saw Bill smiling at him. Paul eventually flagged down a passing van, at which point, while stopped, Bill sprinted at him, lunged, and grappled Paul. They fought, and Paul somehow managed to get into the van, and they drove off, leaving this Bill behind. He went to the police, but nothing happened. They didn't have enough to track who this Bill was. Paul would stay in Australia for a while longer before returning home to England. On Saturday, the 19th of September 1992, some folk on an orienteering course were out training in the beautiful Belanglo State Forest. It was a lovely day, and the orienteers were deep in the woods when they began to smell something foul. After they reported what they found, the police and detectives arrived that night, and the case of the backpacker murders began. The very next morning, a second body was found just 100 feet from the first. The two bodies would later be identified as those of British backpackers, 21-year-old Caroline Clark and 22-year-old Joanne Walters. They were both last seen, like where Paul had stayed, in King's Cross on the 18th of April, 1992, 5 months before they were found. It was over a...
I noticed something. Every time you watch a murder of something, there's always women involved. It's sad to see how women are always the target of when these sick people decide to do something crazy, you know, and then they got all these other laws nowadays trying to take women's rights away from this and that, and which I understand both sides, but at the same time, I mean, come on, man.
A year later, the next bodies were found in that same Belanglo forest. Two more had been found. James Gibson and Deborah Everest, both 19 years old, both from Victoria, Australia. One local had seen something about a year prior, something that was very disturbing in the forest. First, he saw two separate vehicles driving, one a Ford sedan, and the second one was like a four-wheel drive. In the first car, a man was driving, and in the back seat were two other men, and then between the men was a woman, and she had like a cloth over her face. He gave this to the police and, couldn't remember the regs, but could remember some numbers, and off they went. And he signed his name, Alex Millett. The police continued their searches. And the following month, November 1993, another skeleton was found in the Belanglo forest. That of Simone Schmidl, 21, from Germany. She had last been seen leaving Sydney for Melbourne in January 1991. Around her body lay beer bottles, a fire pit, bullet casings. She'd been stabbed to death. her spine severed. 2 days later, another 2 bodies were found. That's 7 altogether. This time it was 2 more Germans. Gabor Nugaber, 21 years old, and Anya Habshid, 20 years old. 37 detectives, if you can believe it, were working on this case full-time. And that's when they started following an earlier lead. Right? The Milat one. The Alex Milat, what he had seen. They wanted to look at him. And he came from a very big family. So they decided to just take a look at the whole Milat family all together. They lived in the area. Ivan worked at a concrete company. His brother Richard, too. Ivan Robert Marco Millet was born on the 27th of December 1945. Out of the 10 boys in the brood, 7 were in trouble with the law. Crazy Ivan, he was mad into it. He grew more and more familiar with the insides of jails. Continued robbing, stealing, joyriding, Grand Theft Auto, that kind of shite. And the violence increasingly grew too. He was married for about 5 years, but she left due to horrific domestic violence. On each of the approximate days the victims disappeared, Ivan was found to have not been in work, while the other Millets were. He lived near the forest. He used to own a 4-wheel drive, but sold it 2 months before the first bodies were found, and the police began surveilling Ivan Millet. Police also tracked down the new owner of Ivan's old 4-wheel drive. Under the seat, they...
Dang, so you mean to tell me they did all this crazy stuff and then sold everything? We about to see if they find any evidence.
And a bullet casing. It was a .22, and it matched casings found in the forest. The investigators also finally discovered Paul Onion's report, and it matched what they had been concluding about Ivan Millet. Same area, same car, matching description, and MO. Ivan Millet's house was raided on the 22nd of May 1994 at 6:30 AM, and he was arrested. Ivan Millet denied any knowledge of the murders. Knives and weapons were found, items belonging to his many victims. He was charged with 7 counts of murder and the attempted murder of Paul Onions. 145 witnesses took the stand. My God. Including Paul Onions. 15 weeks it lasted. Ivan himself went up, denying everything and saying, "Someone's trying to make me look bad." Ivan received a life sentence for each murder, and 6 years for the attempted murder. In 2012, Ivan's great-nephew Matthew Millet and a friend murdered a classmate. They were 19 years old. He was trying to follow in the footsteps of his serial killer uncle. Which is also kind of weird because all of his family, or nearly all his family, say he's innocent when he didn't do it. Matthew and his friend brought the victim, David, out to the bungalow, where Matthew told him he was going to kill him and produced an axe. Matthew butchered the victim. Ivan, you'll be happy to hear, he didn't have a great time in jail. As soon as he arrived, he got the 7 shades of shite kicked out of him. He also tried to escape and failed miserably. All his appeals were worthless, and he's dead now. Toasty, I'm sure.
Well, he definitely got what he deserved. Like my man, Dad Chapter said. He's dead now. He's sitting toasty right where he belongs. He killed all those innocent women and I should say he killed all those young people because there was some guys in there too. But at the same time, all the women, mostly, none of them people deserve that. You know, life sentence for each one, that was very proper. Still, how can you have your family members, your young ones at that, try to follow in your footsteps? That's sick too. You shouldn't even want them to be in your footsteps. You should try to talk to them like this shit ain't what life's supposed to be. But it's a good thing they got caught before they got really involved.
I'm not maybe spared in something. That's not the horror about the African. I don't think these guys can get me free.
Most police stations are usually covered in cameras to catch your every word and movement. Some criminals are too stupid to remember this. Take Chris Watts, for example. Chris was a well-meaning father of 2 young daughters with a pregnant wife expecting the birth of a 3rd child very soon. But after cheating on his wife Shannon with a girl he met at work, the pair had an argument that ended with his wife buried and his kids trapped in oil drums. When he was brought in for questioning, Chris maintained his innocence around the detectives.
They were at the house when I left. They were there.
Soon, though, he asked to talk alone with his dad, and after forgetting he was being recorded, he made a huge mistake.
And she fell terribly. She took over from the bed. I forgot him, Sammy. My babies. That's not the horror about their freaking boiled tank. Please God, get me through.
This was all the detectives needed to arrest him for murdering his entire family, and he was sentenced to live the rest of his life behind bars. But it's not just confessions that detectives can get from this situation. Valuable evidence can also be discovered, like in the strange case of Dawson McGee. Dawson was a strange person from his childhood and into his adult life. In his mid-20s, he was still living with his mother, a person he often disrespected and insulted. Eventually, Dawson was kicked out for his behavior, an act that enraged him and led to him stabbing her 10 times across her body and leaving her to bleed out. During his interrogation, he realized his history of strange behavior could be enough to get him the insanity plea, as long as he played it up a little. So while detectives were present, he put on a huge stutter and made strange movements with his hands. But luckily, this camera showed the police that it was all just an act.
Now this guy right here, up here, what the fuck was this? You know what I'm saying? You massage your hands or something, bro? Like, that was real retarded. How you trying to act like you got issues? You the real mental patient in this one, because they see all the shit that y'all do and what y'all got going on. And then the reason why he doing all this is because this scumbag stabbed that girl all the many times. So, you know, his hand hopefully locked up to where he can't even use the motherfuckers no more. Just for the simple fact of how such a slime scumbag piece of you know what these type of people are.
But what happens when criminals do realize they're being filmed and decide to put on an act?
You're listening in on my conversations, aren't you?
Russell Jones was arrested on suspicion of a sting with the murder of Aaron Fryer and was found with Ellen Fryer and her boyfriend George. Russell was originally friendly with the officers that had brought him in, even laughing and reminiscing with them about various things.
I started talking to my mom during Christmas.
Cool. Where's she at? She in Medford?
Arkansas.
But the second he was alone in a room with a microphone and a camera, Russell put on a show for us all to enjoy.
I don't care if you're fed or not. I can still twist your little mind. Don't piss me off. So, we can do this the nice way and we negotiate, or we can do it the hard way and I can release my bipolar.
The officers found his behavior so strange and polarizing, they left him alone for longer. This is when he began to give up vital information in his ramblings.
It looks really so different, so much as it was deepening her.
Small pieces of information like this are all the detectives need to convict him. The stage curtains closed, and Russell was sentenced to 8 years in prison.
And then, yeah, he is just such a retard. I mean, they seen the boy was so retarded. They said, we're gonna let him sit in the room a little bit longer. See how interesting this motherfucker get. And that's when it got real interesting. Whoever was the one on this case and decided to wait longer, who was motherfucking being the quarterback, the coach, trying to say, let's just see what this guy's all about. That was a very smart technique, very smart thing to do. You know what I'm saying? For y'all to think of something like that, just for the simple fact he told on himself. Oh, self-defense. Maybe it's not self-defense, it's self-defense. Like, really, dude?